Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Liberation Podcast. Today we'll be discussing, analyzing, and reviewing the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins. If you don't know, in eastern Kentucky there was some major flash flooding, mudslides, and freezing that all happened within a span of a few days. I reached out to a local mutual aid organization that is raising money for multiple families and people in the community who are affected by this devastating weather. I will link their CASHAPP and PayPal and Instagram below, so please donate if you are able to. For more content outside of the podcast, please check out our Instagram and TikTok at Literary Liberation and Twitter at LibLibPodcast. And I'm your co-host, Kristen. You can find me at KRXXTXN on all social media platforms.
I'm your co-host, Mariah, and you can find me at Hungry Rye on all social media platforms.
All right, going into the Hunger Games, this one will probably be a little bit different than our typical episodes. One, because it's the trilogy, which we have done trilogies before with like Shadow and Bone. But the main difference is that me and Mariah haven't read these for over 2 years now. I reread the first Hunger Games, but not the rest of them. But
yeah, I think it's about it's been 2 years. I originally had read them because I filmed a movie review with Evan at Left of the Projector podcast and Rob, don't tag Rob, over like on the podcast. So that's why I had read them, just to get like some sort of comparison, because I'd never read them before. I remember when they came out when I was it was 2008 when the first one came out.
yeah.
So middle school, but it wasn't really popular until I was in high school that I saw like people reading it because the movies were coming out. So this was like a huge thing. I don't know, because you're younger, how it was, because you were probably like what, elementary, maybe middle school?
I was in elementary school whenever it came out, but I remember I read the first one in middle school right before the movie came out. Like I stayed up till 4 a.m. like binge reading the first book, and then I never read the rest of them until I was an adult because like I never saw like the movies or anything either. Like I wasn't super into them. But then there was also like this girl that I knew in high school that was like too obsessed, like she did her braid every day and like thought she was Katniss Everdeen in real life. And so, whenever you kind of see someone like that, you're kind of like,
I think
maybe.
it's funny though, because I imagine like this is also when Tumblr was getting popular, and like Harry Potter, Divergent,
Yeah.
the Hunger Games, like Doctor Who, like the
Super
Wholockians or whatever,
Lockian.
like
Yeah.
it was so big, and
Mhm.
I can totally see that being a thing. But I think I was like my junior year of high school.
I think she's a Republican
But I
now too.
remember
So.
my brother read it. I remember my brother was in like middle school and he read it, and so did my mom.
Mhm.
And I think my dad both ended up reading it and really liking it for very different reasons than
Yeah.
I like it. But we'll get into it. I think mainly this podcast episode is going to be kind of discussing like where people go wrong. We'll be discussing populism and the overarching
Neoliberalism.
and yeah, neoliberalism, how that like affects people's like media literacy and being able to like extract the ideas. Some other connections to like say Orwell, because there are some like Orwellian themes that are present in here. So we're kind of gonna touch on everything. Less about Katniss as a character, because I feel like so many people have done it, and we're just gonna try to keep it with what is happening. I will say though, I do think Suzanne Collins has been milking this a little bit too much, because I saw the new covers at Barnes and Noble when I went this last weekend for the Hunger Games, and
Is
they're ugly.
I don't know if that's an author thing. I think that's a publisher thing though.
Well, they need to stop.
Well,
It's so bad.
I don't
The
know.
sprayed edge industrial complex needs to be stopped.
I think a sprayed edge looks good on a hardback. If you're doing it on a paperback, cut it out. Like paperbacks are not
What's
meant
the
for sprayed
point? They're
edge.
not gonna hold up.
No.
It's yeah. Anyways,
It's because
here, if
everybody
you're watching the
likes
video, you can
paperbacks.
see my first editions that I thrifted. They're very beautiful. I love them very much. This is all it needed to be, and they don't need to change it.
But I guess if nobody knows about what Hunger Games is, which is be kind of crazy to me if you've never heard about them or anything like that. It's basically like a dystopian future of America where I guess you would say like a fascist government has taken over, and basically because there was a rebellion like 100 years before the events of this take place, to make the districts and the citizens like realize that they're like complacent, not complacent, I don't know what the word is, like at the Capitol's will, they are forced to send 2 tributes, a boy and a girl between the ages of, like, 11 and 17 or something, to this battle royale death competition.
It's like a battle royale kinda gladiator style fight, and then this is the 74th annual, right?
Yes.
74th?
Yes.
Got that
The
right.
first
The
one
first one is
is
taking place.
the
I
second
think
one is
in
71.
total this takes place over the course of, like, a year, maybe?
The first one, I
Maybe
think,
2?
takes place over, I'd say, a few months. The second one is probably a year later, I think, specifically because the Hunger Games happen once a year. And then the third one almost takes place, like, within a few months after the second book, so I think it's probably about a year, 2 years, the
Yeah.
total of
So
all
it's gotta
3
be, like,
books,
years.
I would say. But
The structure of the story is linear. It is first person limited. You're following Katniss Everdeen. She is a tribute from District 12, which is supposed to be like
the poorest district.
Appalachia.
Mhm.
Like that's like the demographic. Like if you've read these, you kind of know they're all like, divided based on like what crops or
Not
like what they're
crops.
known for. So like because like some of it's like
No,
crops.
well, only the District
But it's, like
11 is
it's not
agriculture.
ethno states, but they're, like, labor states based
Yeah,
on, like, what they can extract the most, like, resources from them, so one of them is, like, technology, there's another one that's, like, textiles, but then there's also, like, where I would be, like, what, District
lumber.
7? 4?
No, I think it's, like,
Lumber?
8 or something, because I think it's where Joanna Mason is from.
We love her.
I think is she from
She's
8 or
just like me
9?
for real. No, she's from the lumber one, they paint her like a tree.
I know, I think it's 8. Don't quote us on the districts though, dude,
I
like
don't know how they end up figuring it out, but yeah, there's technically 13 districts. 13 got decimated because of the revolution and rebels. I
yeah,
feel
because
like
they were
most
supposed to
people
be,
at
like,
this
the
point probably should
instigator.
know. You
District
probably heard of
7
this
is
anyway.
the lumber.
District 7.
That's Mariah's. I guess I'd be in District 12. I'm Katniss Everdeen.
Literally our very own
I'm
Katniss
literally
Everdeen in
Katniss
here.
Everdeen. I literally live here. I live in Kentucky.
You read this, you're like, "Oh my god, I've been
That's
here."
just like me for Will. I know that place. Anyways,
That's so
um,
um where do we want to get? So Suzanne Collins. Okay, I did find out some stuff about Suzanne Collins. So like before we get into the actual review, analysis, all of that shit, we usually talk about the author a little bit. I did not know that Suzanne Collins was a professional career writer for TV shows.
I
I
knew this
didn't know
already.
that
Oswald.
she was her Little Bear, which I
Yeah,
was a big Little Bear fan
I
back
liked
in the
Oswald as a
90s.
child, and Wow Wow Wubsy.
So I had no idea. So she's been doing this for a long time. And obviously, this series is kind of what took her career to the next level. She's like a house name in
Mm-hmm.
like children's libraries and young adult like it's across the board.
She
This
has
series
another
though is like the
series
only
too.
one. Yeah, I looked at the other series. I've never heard of it. I've never
I've
heard anyone
seen
talk
it.
about it. Maybe
I
it's popular. If you're a children's librarian, let me know.
I was
'Cause I have
interested
no
in
idea.
reading it because I had heard about it. Because, like, at my bookstore, like, that's near me, they always have, like, the, like, box set of, like, I think it's, like, 5 books or something of them.
I
So,
wonder if she's like a Margaret Peterson Haddix type,
I don't know, I
like with
haven't
that
read it, and
slow
I don't
writing.
know too much about it, but I thought I don't know, maybe we could do an episode on it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't know when we would do it. Her books, though, have sold over 100 million copies worldwide, so this
Crazy.
is Hunger Games is a big deal.
Yeah. Oh, and her
Sorry, done with
controversies.
the ratings. Yeah, I didn't okay, I saw a couple of controversies. Um, this was on I think it was a fandom or Reddit thing. Apparently, Suzanne Collins has racist tweets about one of her characters in her book, and then somebody else said that, actually, I think this was all the same person, said that she killed a person of color to further her character's storyline and for no other reason. So those were the only two real controversies I could find in connection to
Do you know what
Suzanne
the
Collins.
tweets were?
No.
Okay.
There was no tweets linked.
I
So if
haven't
somebody
heard them
knows what they
before.
are,
Yeah.
I've never heard it either, but this was also, like, an older well, some people were saying, like, how I think it was part of, like, the broader thing with, like, the whitewashing of Katniss Everdeen.
Oh, I mean, that is like I
That's
did.
the movie, and we're just talking about the
Yeah.
books.
And I also don't know, like, the author, like, I think that some people don't understand, like, how little typically authors really have in their adaptations unless they are the one that is specifically, like, writing it and, like, involved in it and, like, actually a producer of it. Because I know a lot of the times, unless you're, like a lot of people don't really understand, like, movies and how they're made, and I'm not claiming to be an expert or anything, but a lot of the time, like, even the director doesn't have, like, as much power as what you think. It's a lot to do with, like, who is putting money into the project. So it's a lot of the time executive producers who decide where the money goes and what they want their money funding, and so they're kind of like the main people, which, like, typically movies have a lot of executive producers because they take millions and millions of dollars to make, which again, that's its own conversation on why they cost so much to make, blah, blah, blah. That's, like, a whole thing, so I don't really think necessarily, like, blaming the author for, like, a adaptation of something and how, like, that adaptation went is at fault of the author, and nor should it be, like, centered around the author.
And we can talk about the second one a little bit later, like, in connection, because even then, I don't necessarily know if that's a fair crit, because I don't feel like it was.
It wasn't like how it is in Throne of Glass.
Yes, this was no Nehemia
And, like,
situation.
that's
I'm
the thing
excited.
is that, like, it's a battle royale style story. So, like, the
It's
whole
got a
thing is,
Disney about
like,
the movie then.
everyone dies. Like,
They have to.
that's the whole thing. Hello? Anyways, not to spoil the books
We
if
can
you
get
haven't read
into
them.
the ratings per Goodreads. I did see that this has gotten a I went to the review. If you go on Goodreads, you can see how many awards it's gotten. I couldn't even count how many, like, it's dozens
Just
of
the first one
awards
or
that
all
this
of
has
them?
received. I think I looked at the box set, and then I looked at the first one too.
Oh,
But The Hunger Games has received critical acclaim. I don't know what that means. And then the British aggregate at what? A British aggregator of press reviews, the book received an Omniscore of 4.5 out of 5. Oh my god, I can't talk. Which tracks. If you look at the Goodreads reviews, it's kind of crazy. The Hunger Games got 4.34 stars and 9.2 million ratings and like 231,000 physically written out reviews. Like, it's huge.
yes.
Catching Fire was the same. 4.34 stars, 3.8 million ratings, and 132,000 reviews. And then Mockingjay only got 4.1 stars and 3.4 million ratings, but it had 5,000 more reviews than the previous with 137,000 reviews. So I
That's
thought that was
interesting.
interesting how it got more, because that doesn't typically end up happening, but I can imagine
It's
people had a lot to say.
also interesting how consistent it like, obviously, like, the 9.2 for the first one is a little crazy, but, like, 3.8 to 3.4 for Catching Fire and Mockingjay is usually a lot of the times whenever at least, like, we're reviewing books and we look at the Goodreads and stuff, the second and, like, sometimes third books get, like, nowhere close. It'll be, like, half, I feel like, typically. It won't be, like, this close where there's only, like, 400,000 less people reading Mockingjay on Goodreads specifically. It's kind of interesting too because
I was very surprised. It's like not like a book talk darling, but this is like a very cherished series for a
mhm.
lot of people. So I feel like that's probably why. And
Um,
that's it. Thanks for listening. I'm just kidding.
our
Let's
non-spoiler review, we could do that real
Oh my
quick
goodness,
before
what
we
I
go to spoiler.
did I copy and paste I think I gave them all 5 stars. Maybe the last one got like a 4.5.
I gave
I don't know if I
the
rate.
first one, I think I'm gonna say 4.5. The second one, I gave 4.75, and then the third one, I gave 3.5 stars. So I think it averages out to about a 4-star review for the whole series, because I really do not like Mockingjay, which we can talk more in the spoilers zone, but kind of whack, in my opinion.
All right. So I gave the first one 5 stars. Like, it's a really solid
I think
first
I gave
book,
it
and I
four and a
think you can
half.
leave it
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah, it's
It's really
really
solid. And then I gave Catching Fire 4 and Mockingjay 4. And I don't I did not differentiate because this was not when I was using
Storygraph.
Storygraph to do ratings or anything. I kind of just like threw it out there again. I read these a while ago. So that's where I ended up putting them. I think we both end up like recommending these books. Like, I don't think you can really
I
go wrong if you want to just offer somebody a solid series. However, the politics is where it gets a little interesting, and we have to be really intentional with how we're recommending them and like who we're recommending them to. I think
Yes.
that's how I will put that.
Well, because I mean, we both have already talked about like the person that I know that was really obsessed with the Hunger Games and then now kind of having more conservative viewpoints. And for those that don't know, Mariah's family is a pretty conservative family as well, and they read the Hunger Games and enjoy them. And it's not only like media literacy is a problem, I think it's also because of the way that Suzanne Collins politics are herself. Whenever we were like looking up her politics, she's never definitively like stated she's in support of anything or any like economic policies, any politicians or anything like that. And I feel like that is very telling about someone personally. And I feel like you can definitely see that within the novels as well because they don't fully commit to anything, which like you could be like, oh, it's because it's young adult, blah blah blah. It's to make children come with their own opinions and stuff like that, which like Uprising is young adult and it's very clearly pro socialist. And it's still
Yeah.
open ended
And that's
enough.
the indisputable like talking point with like like that book truly blew me away with what a children's or young like teen book can be. It changed the bar, like, or I guess set the bar for me. Which we ended up reading that after we read Hunger Games. So
Yeah.
reflecting back, I think we might end up rating these a little bit differently. Especially like the more I learned, like Suzanne Collins, her father being an Air Force officer and like military historian, he was like a like career military personnel, and he served in the Vietnam War, and he came home and he had
Trauma.
PTSD or something. Trauma. It doesn't specifically say, but that's generally what it is. And you know what?
Deserved it. Should I say that?
Spoilers. Let me get my Joker face paint out. You get what you fucking deserve.
You
Um,
know?
If you
Yeah.
don't know, we are very anti-imperialist here, and if you know anything about the Vietnam War, it's just anyone that's like elective. It wasn't like this person got drafted.
Yeah.
They did this for a career.
I feel like if there was somebody that was drafted, you could have a little bit more like compassion for them. But this is somebody like this is like someone choosing to like not like in World War II, you know, like working for Hitler necessarily, but like it's kind of up there, you know?
Really bad. Like people like what we know, what you're taught in school about like the Vietnam War is nothing.
Nothing.
It is nothing. Where you learn about it, it is absolutely insane. Solidarity with all of the Vietnamese comrades, what they were
Yes.
able to accomplish. Fantastic job. That's who won the war, and despite how like the US tries to rewrite it,
Mhm.
um just putting that out there. Anyways, I do think that this influenced the politics of the book significantly.
Yeah.
Katniss is kind of like a self-insert for her, and I read an article. I'm gonna list some of these because we read these 2 years ago. I had a lot more free time to read articles. People had written like uh,
Bec-
what do we
because
want to call these?
these
Like
novels are
literary
so
analysis.
yeah, because like these novels are literally like so popular, like so many people have written like essays and like things like that about it. So there's a lot more than like I think what we typically end up reviewing.
It was
Where
very fun to read through some of these. Some of them were really bad. I read through some that are not in here that were just not good. I saw like Milton Friedman get referenced, and I was like, "Oop, get me the fuck out of
gotta
Dodge!
go
I can't do
by.
this." So, but there was one that talked about. It's called. Let's see if I have Katniss, Military Bratness, Military Culture, and Suzanne Collins' Hunger Game trilogy, and I thought it was really interesting the way that she talked about Katniss's mom having mental illness and how this is like a trope with women in like military like who are married in and people who like lose their partners or whatever, like having this sort of insert of the maternal individual with like mental health and how that affects the children like is part of military bratlet, which I'd never heard of that term before I read this.
Either.
So I thought that was really interesting to read that. I don't know if
Yeah.
anyone else has read anything. I don't read military romance. I don't read military lit fic. I'm
Me neither.
sorry. So
Not at
this is
all.
my only frame of reference, which is not something I have ever seen anyone talk about this. When I had originally did the review with Evan and Rob, we kind of just focused on like the populist aspect of the novels. But I think it's interesting looking at Suzanne Collins as a person and like what she experienced as a kid growing up, seeing like the father with mental health issues and then like the mother potentially with mental health issues and like people around her. What else? What else did you want to talk about? I went through a lot of articles. I don't know if you had anything specifically you wanted to talk about. Maybe just that one by Rebecca Hill that
Yeah.
you referenced, because that seemed to be like the predominant theme. I honestly I think the biggest issue with Hunger Games as a whole, as a trilogy, is that people do not fucking get them, and it drives me crazy. And I'm sure Kristen can spearhead the conversation on this because this has been
Well,
a heated topic of discussion.
well, because I think the thing is that like because Suzanne Collins, like me and you can agree that Suzanne Collins has not read Marxist theory or any like left wing theory, at least at the point of when the Hunger Games were published and written. You can tell by the way that she writes and the way she talks about things is that maybe she's read history, but she has not read any like left wing economic theory, right? And so because of that, I would say that she doesn't have like a full grasp of like dialectical materialism or anything like that. And so like with the way that she writes, it ends up being like a very like populist book where it's just like, let me critique society, but in a way that is lackluster and falls flat because you have people that are able to read this and be super conservative and be like, this is why communism is bad, sort of thing. Like, this government is going, a communist government, blah, blah, blah. Or even like if you are somebody who is on the left and you read it and then you look at like the way that District 13 is portrayed, in many ways, it is a very much an anti-communist sentiment as well there. And I think because of that, it doesn't necessarily make these good, like, left-wing books, in my opinion. Like, I think they're entertaining reads, and I do think that, like, for, like, kids in middle school, high school that are learning about, like, oppressive governments and things like that, that they can be good in that way, as long as you're also, like, talking to your child and, like, explaining to them that, like, hey, not everything like an author does is perfect. Like they can have some good critiques about certain things, but they can still come to the wrong conclusions themselves.
I can agree. I think that was in Capital or the Capital, the Hunger Games fandom and neoliberal populism is the
Mhm.
article that kind of inspired this, because when we look at like the Hunger Games, we can acknowledge that like there is evidence of collective struggle. There is a proletarian revolution. Like we can acknowledge these things. If you have read the theory, you understand like what's going on. But where it misses is that it hyperfixates on totalitarianism. And I know it's like a meme where people will be like, if I hear so, like if you see somebody say like, oh, tyranny or totalitarianism or authoritarianism, as somebody who's a Marxist, it's usually a red flag.
Mhm.
I can't think of a time where it's really not, if I'm going to be honest. And I know
Yeah.
that people don't wanna fall into, like, tanky, and you don't wanna be, like, fall into dogma, right? But when you have a novel that is supposed to be or trilogy that is supposed to be depicting a revolution, and I understand that Katniss is a teenager, so we do have a limited perspective. We're not getting the economic aspect. And Katniss Everdeen, for being who she is very class conscious. It's very
Mhm.
evident as the story progresses and her character builds through all of that she's experiencing, through lived experience, through her education that she ends up learning in District 13. Like she has this. However, like people who are reading this, they don't have anything but like the state sponsored education that has been thrust upon them intentionally so that they can only interpret and extract certain themes from books, right? Like this is all like
Yes.
intentional.
Well, because
It's
like
structural. So it makes it what would she describe it at in the article as being like anti-institutionalism and redirects a critique of capitalism into anti-totalitarianism. So it kind of redirects and recontextualizes what the real issue, because this is a dystopian novel, we're supposed to be discussing the material conditions. We're no longer fixated on like making those real world connections because we don't really understand the class issue. We're just like, oh, people are bad.
Bad in
People in
government.
authority
Yeah.
positions are bad.
Government bad.
Government bad. So that's like,
And I think
yeah.
that's like what my main critique is of the Hunger Games, because I do think like as Marxist, like if you're a Marxist, you can read this and enjoy this and critique it. That's great. It like as a Marxist, but if you're not a Marxist, I'm sorry, you just piss me off. Like please don't talk about these books because you're going to sit here and like project all of these ideals onto it where it's like, yes, it is critiquing the US government. Like very clearly is it critiquing capitalism and stuff like that. But in the end, it does not become like this anti-capitalist but like there's no anti-capitalist finale.
We're left with a very ambiguous ending, which is very frustrating for me.
Yeah.
Because as like a Marxist, I could tell you exactly what, like I could tell you the Marxist analysis of what happens in this society and how it could have been portrayed as being like a proletarian revolution. Now they're in like a state socialist transitionary period, and that's why they're having elections and all this stuff. Oh, but this is all based on like my pre-existing knowledge and all of the Marxist text and theory that I consume, all the historical shit that I just gobble up because that's just what I do
But
in my free time. However, other people don't have that, so in their head they're just like, oh, just restructuring a bourgeois like liberal democracy is probably what they have in their head.
I think that's what Suzanne Collins probably has in her head as well, with the way that her ideals and her like from like what we know, because obviously like she's not a very online person or author, and so like since she's not very like staunchly anything online, I think she ends up falling, I think, into that category as well, where it's like these people are writing revolutionary stories without really fully understanding like historical revolutions and what they have done. It almost like reminds me of like the way that like the American Revolution is.
I feel like I could fix Suzanne Collins though. Give me 2 hours in a room with her.
I can fix her. Let me
I could
fix
fix
her.
her. Because there's no way. There's so many themes that like she gets right, but the execution, because it's not flushed out and as overt, because this is like a YA novel, I know things are meant to be like speculative to an extent to get kids to develop their media literacy. They're supposed to be like, if you're younger, you're supposed to be like reading and talking to other people in your classes about like the things that you're consuming, your media that you're consuming. They're not, but that's not what's happening here.
That
It's
doesn't
really
happen here.
frustrating.
And I think that's what's interesting though, is that there is, I don't know if you've seen this on TikTok right now, but there is like this teacher that is reading the Hunger Games trilogy with her class. And I think that's a really interesting way to like teach this and like to talk about this versus like whenever I was reading it in school and everyone around me was reading it in school, it's like a leisure read. You're not reading it like so many people, like especially like on TikTok and like people, that are the way that they are, that aren't class conscious and things like that. They're reading these things and they're like, "Oh, I read this for fun and to turn my brain off and to not have deeper thoughts and blah blah blah." Where I think going on to like the anti-intellectual side of this, I think like because of like the popularity of the Hunger Games, unfortunately, I bet most of the fans are of the Hunger Games probably fall into that anti-intellectual category just because of how popular and how large this series is.
And I hope that people who are listening, right? We're about 30 minutes in. I hope you all know this is not necessarily a moralizing issue if you are feeling
No.
that you're being personally attacked or not trying to get it. I don't expect other people to sit and read like hours of these extra pieces of work. However, we do that for fun. So why would we not offer our lens, our critique,
Mhm.
understanding how like working class liberation needs to come about, because we consume so much of this. We study movement history, and we just want to bring other people up to the same level that we are. And I think if
These
you were
are a
to
good
start somewhere,
start. Like
this is a good start. It's a good start to get your mind in the right place so you
because
can understand at minimum
yeah.
the difference in classes. And like I think I read this other one this other article called Economic Inequality in Suzanne Collins' The Hunger Games, a Marxist Reading. And it talked a lot about the symbolism that was present in her book that I didn't even take into consideration, like how the AVOXs could be a placeholder for undocumented immigrants. So, like the severed tongue, they're unable to
Communicate.
express they can't communicate effectively because they don't know the language. Their labor is being extremely exploited. So I thought like
Yeah.
that was an interesting connection. There's also connections with the division among workers, which you see very early on in the Hunger Games, where
That's like the
there
whole point of
are
the districts.
like it within like the districts, like there's people who have more and who don't, and
Hmm.
Katniss and Gale are both very aware that like it's intentional that the
Yes.
government is doing this to cause friction between people. Another thing, fantastic. The three-finger power, that's a power fist. That was what the placeholder of the three-finger gesture is, that solidarity that you see in District 11, I
Yes.
think,
Yeah.
in Catching Fire.
Yes.
That's another placeholder. Like that symbol has been part of movements for a very long time. So like all of these things, if you're not actively studying these histories, like maybe you aren't able to pick up on them. Some of these I am not even able to pick up on. Like I first read through because the
Hmm.
pacing of this book is very quick,
Yeah.
and there is a more of a priority on Katniss's self-preservation and then also the love triangle aspect. And I feel like those kind of take away from some of like the really important themes that I really wish could have been showcased a little bit better. And definitely you're not getting in the movies.
No, there's
I
no
don't
time
think you're
for
seeing any of this in
reflection
the
at
movies.
all because I think even Katniss doesn't even reflect on a lot of the reasons, like, why she was chosen to be, like, the figurehead for the rebellion and things like that because, like, she is very much, like, a survival, like, that is what her priority is, like, her survival, and I think that can relate a lot to a lot of the people that also live in, like, late stage capitalism where you don't have the time to, like, reflect and, like, look at, like, what your government is doing and things like that because you're so exhausted, you're so tired, you don't have time to look at these things, and I think it shows that, but then the thing is that whenever you are reading, like, a novel or reading anything or, like, even consuming any type of media, like, reflection is necessary, I think, and that's, like, why I love rating things because it really, like, forces you to sit down and think about what you just read and how that affected you, how it makes you view the world around you and things like that, and I think that's something is that, like I mean, not necessarily book talk, but, like, I think a lot of the time, a lot of people are just so obsessed with, like, moving on to the next thing rather than, like, sitting and thinking about what they've consumed too.
I do think there is merit to some of the people who have come on. I know there was like a big whole thing, the difference between like literature and like books, or I can't remember what they ended up saying. Like they were like, oh, people
What?
aren't reading literature. If you're able to like read through a book in a day, like are you really able to like sit and really extract all the themes and whatnot? Or was that even present? And it was like a big discourse a couple, I don't know, it was a couple months ago, maybe a year ago on TikTok, and specifically the
Mhm.
book talk. I don't know if you saw that. It was like a
Don't
big
recall.
deal. People were like going back and forth. They're like, no, all like reading is like it's all literature, but there is some merit to understanding like some of these books because they don't really
Again,
have a lot going on, which
well, cause like
they're enjoyable, but you're not reflecting. Like if you're able to read a lot of books, there's some like I'm saying this as somebody that reads a lot of fucking books every
yeah,
year.
Mariah read
There are
200
some
something
books
books last year.
I'm reading, um, when it's like the Ruby Dixon or Docs, whatever, like the Freedom McFadden books, like even
Yeah.
like they're quick, they're so quick paced that people are just like, oh my god, the twist, whatever. But like, are you really engaging with the text? I
Like,
just implore people to like sit and think about that. Like, what you're reading, are you taking a step back and
I don't
really understanding what's going on? I think that's why book clubs are so important right now, and I'm so happy they're popping up.
well, cause I think the thing is too is that, like, not everything you read has to be, like, some extreme, like, reflective, like thought-provoking, extreme, like, literature that you need, like, a class to study with. Like, I'm not saying that at all. Like, I have plenty of books. Like, I literally just read a Freida McFadden book earlier this month because I was like, I don't wanna read anything serious, you know? And so, like, it's not like I'm saying that everything you need to read needs to be something that's so extreme and, like, so, like, pen to paper, I need to be writing out thinking about every thought that I have about this, but I do think maybe even at least like one book a month you should be like deeply thinking about, at least somewhat, or at least some form of media where it could be a movie, a documentary, a TV show, or something where it's something that actually has you reflect and thinking about how you can relate it to like your personal life and your real life and people around you and things like that. Because like that's one thing everyone does is everyone consumes media, like literally.
I don't think people realize that. It's like when everything is political, that means your books, that
Yeah.
means your music, that means your
TV
movies, your
shows, yeah.
YouTube video. Like there is something going on in everything, and obviously there's some things that are like completely head empty that there's not a lot going on.
But then there's a
But
reason
if you're
why they're
only
that way
consuming those,
too. Yeah.
like a lot of like dark romance novels, I'm sorry, there's not a lot going on in them.
Yeah.
There really isn't. I read them. I know exactly. If anything, I think they're a fantastic like character study. I love getting in their heads because I'm like, what the fuck am I reading? But I'm coming at it from like a Marxist feminist perspective. So like I'm doing that. People are doing like, yeah, this is what I want. This is like
I want to be
keeping this for the
stabbed while
spank
I'm
bank.
yeah. It's like
Like stuff like that, and it's just crazy. And I know we're supposed to be talking about the Hunger Games, but
yeah.
I want people to build up their media literacy. That is my biggest thing because after this election season, and we had people that are like, "Nope, cute winter boots. I'm literally Katniss Everdeen."
Yeah.
And I understand that's like where you're at, but we need to get up a
You
little
need
bit
to keep
higher.
going.
We
Well,
gotta
because like
try. We gotta build up our media literacy,
it's
our
like
language. You gotta be able to understand these things.
bring back English class because there's so many people that are like sitting in class where it's like, oh, it doesn't matter that the curtains were blue, sort of thing. Where it's like your entire English class has taught you how to analyze and how to view text and how to consume this is why like you're reading classics and bullshit like that in your high school classes. Like it was teaching you how to do this, and then everyone's like, why doesn't anybody know any media literacy? It's like because of the way that schools are now, people are caring less and less about them, less and less about their schooling and less about class. And there's so many people that are like, where's the media literacy class? We need to bring that back. Where it's like, that's literally just your English class. Hello?
I wish we could have it where people could go back to school and there is
No,
like an
literally.
element, right? Like we have like the schooling system is fucked. The higher
Especially in the United
education system is
States.
stupid expensive. I know when I was going to college in my like rural town, it was like at least $100 per credit.
I think
So if you're taking a 4 credit class, that's $400.
I lived on campus, but it was like $7,000 for one semester.
Yeah, it's really expensive, and that's like
So,
nothing now.
yeah.
That was years ago.
Yeah, that was in 2017, 2018. So I can only
So
imagine what it is now.
this is why we in the bookish spaces
We do this
we're
for
not trying to be
people, yeah.
pretentious to say like, oh, there's like deeper. Like, no, we're trying to implore you to do these things because you need to like be able to make these connections,
Yeah.
and then also maybe urge you to want to learn more real world history. Like
Because
there's
they're
so much you can learn from studying the Vietnamese Revolution, the Cuban Revolution. You could study the Chinese Revolution. You could study the USSR or like
mhm.
GDR. Like there's so many different places, and I know it's so deeply propagandized, but don't you want to know why? And then we get to like this is where it gets issue like a problem is like with books like this, then we get to like District 13 and Mockingjay, and we are
Oh.
seeing just a copy and paste. I have said this is like Kitty Animal Farm. It literally is. Like, if
No,
you've
when,
ever read
like,
Animal Farm, District
Katniss
13 is literally the embodiment
I'm
of
sorry, when Katniss kills President Coin, that pisses me off so bad. Like, it pisses me off so bad because she literally has the opportunity to kill Snow, and, like, yes, I get the point that he dies right there, but, like, what if he didn't die right then? You know what I'm saying?
no. This is what I want to know, right? Is like why throughout the entirety of Mockingjay, like when you're like getting everything, it's talking about how like District 13 like prohibits alcohol, right? Which is supposed to be a jab at like the USSR.
Yeah.
The serving sizes are based on your age, height, body type. You do realize that like they were isolated. And
They
then
don't
I see
have
reviews, people are
accessibility.
like, actually they were really selfish for doing this all in the background for the last like 70 years. They were really selfish.
Bruh.
This is self-preservation. They were living under fucking ground. What do you
Yeah.
mean?
And like the
And then
thing,
like this like sorry, I'm looking back through some of these quotes that I threw in here real quick, and it's just it's all bad. Like it's all bad.
yeah.
This is where the book falls apart,
Like that's
and
why
it pisses me
Mockingjay
off.
is like the worst. That's why I gave it 3.5 stars because I was like it's entertaining, yes, and like I love Joanna and Katniss's like dynamic, like where they're like overcoming like their trauma of like the Hunger Games together and stuff like that. And I think even like Katniss's like familial relationship with Prim and her mother and things like that. Um, I think those are like really interesting dynamics and things. And then just like at the end where it's just like, and communism is also bad. Bye.
Justice for Gale though, because
No,
I will never
literally,
forget
yeah.
when everyone was like, Gale killed all the kids. No, he didn't. No,
No.
he didn't. It's like Stalin stole all of my family's grain with a giant
And
spoon.
then like
Like,
his
no,
perspective on like the nut too, where like they were like, oh well, we could just like bomb the whole nut and like kill everybody in it. And everyone's like, oh my god, Gail, why would you even think of doing that? Like there's innocent people in there. Oh my god, Gail. Or it's like, okay, well, they knew what they were doing, did they not?
that's the thing is like you're getting throughout like the first two books or whatever Katniss's whole like inner monologue where she's learning about how like the capital like they will eat and then they take this drink to like purge up their own food and she's just like we don't even have enough food to sustain our own existence
Yeah.
and these people are here and it's like do you really think they would be the ones supporting the revolution?
I really like the idea too because like it talks about too about how like the capital people don't view the Hunger Games as violence or anything of that nature. And it very much reminds me of like the United States and like the citizens here, like whenever they watch like on TV, like the bombings of like Palestinians and things like that. But and they don't view that as like anything. But then once the Palestinians start taking armed resistance against their oppressors of like the IOF and things like that, then they're like, oh my god, these are violent, evil people, blah, 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 sort of thing, where it's like, so you view one side as violent, but you don't view the other side as violence, where it's like very important theme within the Hunger Games as well, where the capital citizens who don't view the Hunger Games as violent, but then they try to paint this narrative and the propaganda that like District 13 rebelling and like the what I don't even remember what they call the dark days or whatever, is that like whenever District 13 was originally rebelling.
It was something like that.
And then they view that as violent though, but then they view like what they do to these innocent children that have no connection to like any type of rebellion as nothing. Or
I
not
wish
nothing, but
it just feels like because of the way that like Suzanne Collins, right? Her father was in the Vietnam War. So I imagine this is like where her perspective is. This is like this and then like the Iraq
mhm,
War too was another thing that inspired her with this. So with that, I don't know if 9/11 came up so she's trying to acknowledge that like oh these people dying in this bombing is like correlated to a similar sort of like terrorist attack in like the Imperial Core and that's like where this kind of like ethical conundrum is being faced. It was like we can acknowledge 9/11 is bad, but we can
yeah,
also acknowledge that the US interventionism in these countries that led up to this event happening was also bad and
yeah,
also to a significantly larger degree, but we don't view it as bad because of white supremacy.
yeah, exactly. Like that's the thing is that like the thing is that like, and it's like the United States is why 9/11 happened. You know, like they are explicitly like the reason why with the way that they perpetuate violence and harm in other parts of the world. We don't see that here because we are in the capital. So we don't see these things and the people here don't view those things as violence because they don't see them as violence because that's not the way that the government presents it as. Where any retaliation or retaliatory like attacks are viewed as violent and evil and came out of nowhere and stuff like that. And I think it's because like a lot of the times like the United States is like so propagandized and like in the Hunger Games it's the same way, but then you sit here and people look at it and be like, "Okay, well, that just means all government bad. The end."
Like no, one, if you'd like to find a way to like understand people like Gail who have this like
It's almost like a
mindset,
trolley
I guess, and
problem
I think
sort
it's
of
bad.
thing.
Read Franz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth. read on violence.
It's like a
Please,
trolley
for the love of
problem, you
God,
know?
read something. Read Orientalism by Edward Said. Like, so you can understand, like, this othering of people and why people in the capital don't view other people in the districts as human beings. They view them as a form of entertainment. Like, you
Yeah.
need this. It's not just about building empathy, but, like, you're not able to see past your own privilege to be able to extract these themes to understand, like, why things are happening. And clearly, like, Suzanne Collins is close. Like, she's not far off. Like, there's these instances where you can kind of see it, but then she leads readers to believe something else because Katniss's narrative is the one that's dictating what's happening and how we ought to view things. So I think you had a really good, or no, that was 57%. I was looking at the very end, see if there was any other like closing thoughts or I just like you really did like encapsulate the way that the end of this book kind of happens with them
Yeah, well,
killing
because
the bad authority figure because authority creates problems. We have Snowball is now the humans
yeah,
and the farm revolution did nothing. That's like it's the Orwell moment.
yeah. Where it's like, and the thing is that I think like that's like one of my main like with the way that it ends. It's like yes, you're like oh, it's a proletarian revolution, blah blah blah, but you don't even get like any type of satisfaction to like what happens because it immediately like thrusts you into like Katniss's grief because I mean like she did lose her sister, which is like the closest thing to love that she's ever learned or known or anything like that. Where then you have like PETA coming to take care of her and things like that, and then like it basically ends up just like getting the epilogue is just them having children. It's like no offense, you could have wrote that in a sentence about them having children and then be like, and now our government lets us all eat or something, you know?
To come back around to the first article, she did talk about the epilogue of this, and I thought her concluding like sentence in this was so like spot on. Where she said the epilogue might aim to give us an image of a happy future generations after the games are abolished, but in it, Collins also gives us the retrogressive image of Katniss as a female warrior stripped of her power and obliged to fill exactly the kind of role Snow's capital wanted her to be. Docile, nurturing, non-threatening, and powerless. And I thought that was a really important thing because that pissed me off when I was like, okay, she's a mom, and when she never wanted to be that.
Yeah. Which, like, a lot of the times, like, throughout the text, she was saying she never wanted to be a mom because she didn't want her children to be raped and stuff like that. Where it's like, even then, where it's like, we don't know anything about, like, their government or, like, what's happening now. So, how do we even know that, like, her family is still safe? And, like, there's not enough, like, focus on, like, the rest of the world either in this, I think, too. Like, because I'd be really interested to see, to, like, what other countries, like, if they're just like, yeah, America over there, just being America. You know?
What an ending, though. Like, that was one of the biggest letdowns, like, reading this, because I don't think I had finished the second part of Mockingjay, like, the movie, so I had no idea what was gonna happen in the very end.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
got to the very end, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?"
But this is no
Um,
hate towards PETA. I love PETA. PETA is the love of my life. If anybody like I think book boyfriends should strive to be like PETA. I love PETA very much. I will say. I think PETA is one of the sweetest characters in this entire thing. I think PETA is a great character. I think he does have complexities and things like that. But I do think it is regressive to Katniss's character. Is like the main issue.
yeah, period.
But PETA is great.
I don't have anything else to
I
say
love
about
you,
her.
PETA.
He's got why they made Gale become, like, a peacekeeper or whatever in the end, that shit doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense to me
They made
either.
they made
That's it
Gale a
all falls
cop.
apart. The very end of this,
It's liberalism.
my Gale would never. Gale would never.
No, he would
Gale.
never. He went to District 2 to become a cop, bro. Not my Yale.
Hashtag not my Gale. Oh my
Um,
god. I have a feeling that this will be a popular episode, but I don't think it's gonna be a popular episode. If you're picking up what I'm laying down,
the
like I hope that people that are listening
liberals
to
are about to
this
be pissed off.
I drink liberal tears. No, I just hope people have an open mind and understand where we're coming from with this. Like, we have been with our oppositions against liberals for the last I don't know, 5 years. Maybe basically the
Longer.
entire existence of political TikTok, maybe even longer.
Me longer. I've been fighting liberals my whole life.
Yeah.
Anyways, but yeah, liberals, do yourself a favor. If you think about commenting, don't. That's what I think. I think maybe you should read something good. Maybe try Uprising since you like little kid books. Since you
Yeah,
can't
I
read
think
anything
Uprising is
more
really good.
complex. But
If you're
Uprising
to
is a really
read
good book.
another book, let's see, can I pull up anything else? I imagine a lot of people that read this are women. I've recommended this so many times. It's The Women's Revolution, Russia 1905 to 1917 by Judy Cox. If you're looking for like a strong female main character, you're going to get so many. You're going to get Alexandra Kollontai. You're going to get Olga Kamina. I can't pronounce all of their names and be honest.
They're all
I hate to
Russian.
call her Lenin's wife. I think it's Nadeska Krupskaya. She's really fucking cool. Like before she married Lenin, and even while she was married to Lenin, like
she didn't lose her coolness like Katniss did marrying PETA.
that is true. She gained like aura points. That's what the kids say.
Oh yeah. Other than that, do you have any other recommendations? I guess. Would you recommend like
Why women have
Chaos
better sex under socialism?
for
Chaos.
like
What do you
for
mean?
like CIA intervention and things like that to talk about like the way that propagandized to get like a different perspective than what most people are probably taught. Like how you know what I'm saying?
What would I what would I recommend? Let me
Why
pull
women
up
have better
this.
sex under
I
socialism by
have
Kristen
okay.
Godsey.
I know that Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine is supposed to be about 9/11 and like media.
Okay.
So that's like a solid one. It might change your perspective on it. Washington Bullets by Vijay Prashad is another one where it talks about just like the assassinations by the CIA. That gives you like a really good one. And then like the Jakarta Method by Vincent Bevins, like you can't go wrong. Or Still Life of Bones by Alexa Haggerty. Those are all really solid ones. So you have something to go off of. Now, next time we're back here, we're going to be discussing A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
More
We're going to
Suzanne
take you to
Collins hate.
the 10th annual Hunger Games following Coriolanus. We're doing this all up until the newest book. If you're wondering,
Yeah.
this is what's happening. We're doing this up until Sunrise on the Reaping, where we can read about Haymitch's book. I honestly like predictions for what this is going to be. What do we think Haymitch's book? I hope we see some insight into District 13 and like the rebellion forces and see if maybe Haymitch was based the whole time. We can see why he has an alcohol addiction. Other than that, I kind of feel like it might be a money grab. I'm not gonna lie.
Well,
That's
that's
kind of
my
where I'm
thing
at.
too, is because like Suzanne Collins has like been quoted as saying that she doesn't write books unless she has something to say, where it's like we got enough of your liberalism, so maybe like if this is like a true like Marxist character, because like I think like in the regular Hunger Games, I do think Haymitch is a compelling character, and I do like his characterization, and I don't necessarily think that he's like anti-communist as maybe as like Katniss is portrayed, because you don't really see a lot of his perspectives because like he is like an alcoholic and he is drunk most of the time. So I am like cautiously optimistic because I do like Suzanne Collins' writing. I do think her books are entertaining, in that way, but I do again still think that like you should look at them with a broader perspective and not just like your limited mind whenever you read, especially dystopian novels, I think, specifically.
I don't know what it's going to be about next time. I think the focus is going to be kind of about let me clarify that. That was not said correctly. We're going to talk about like just like fash ideology, which I think is going to
Yeah.
be pertinent to the times, but also the structure of the book and how I think we can discuss like criticisms of
Yeah.
the story. But we'll try to keep it as educational as we can because I imagine a lot of people that are listening to this maybe have never heard of us before. We have a lot of other videos. They're not
Yeah.
videos. Jesus Christ, podcast
Podcasts.
episodes. If you want to listen to them, we've been doing this for a while.
Over a year now.
So if see if there's any books that you've read before and you're interested in hearing a review of.
We've done a lot of
But
book
if you're
talk
leaving the next
darlings.
We have, and if you have a book talk darling that you would like us to tackle, let me know. I'll read it first, and then I will bully Kristen into reading it. If you would like an alternative to The Hunger Games, check out Kristen's gonna pull it up.
Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Ajaya Brenya, I think is how you say it. Where this is a more adult version too of the Hunger Games. Specifically, like, so do not, like, if you're a child, don't read this. But I think if you're in high school, you're definitely old enough to read this. But it's another dystopian future that's actually like a left-wing critique of like the prison system in the US and capitalism extensively.
It's very diverse.
Yes.
The politics of it are very good. I know some people think it's pretentious. However, I think it gives a lot of people who maybe are just getting started an idea of where to go from there. So,
and it's very
it'll get
educational,
the
like,
ball rolling.
actually.
So,
Like, unlike the Hunger
yeah,
Games.
very seldom do we say, "Oh, a fictional book is educational." Like, no,
No,
this
there's
is
footnotes in this that are actually like, I learned
they're real.
from this. Other than that, I don't really know if I have any other like dystopian suggestions. I
I
wonder
don't
if we
read a lot of
should.
dystopian novels.
Do you?
No, but we do want to read Parable of the Sour by
We live
Octavia
in a
Butler.
dystopian, so
Oh my god, I can't talk.
I live enough dystopian in my life. I don't need more of it.
I feel like if you like dystopian novels, you would like learning about like the US government and US interventionism. I just feel like that's the natural progression. Like if you can't get enough and you're like, "Man, I want more. I want something that's like really gonna
Let's
fuck
look at
me up."
real people.
Look
Not
up
some fictional
Operation
girl.
Phoenix on Wikipedia. Just like go down look up MK Ultra and the implications of it. Yeah.
Other
There
than
we go.
that,
Thanks for listening.
yeah.
Really appreciate you all.
Next episode, Ballad of Songsters and Snakes. And don't forget to donate if you are able to, if you have some extra funds, to the mutual aid organization that is local to me to help out families that were affected by these devastating floods here in Kentucky. But other than that, I don't know what the fuck that is. Thanks for listening. Thank you and good night.